So first off, I want to thank you so much, Zoe, for being on the show. Really, really do appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for
And
having me. I'm so excited.
thank you so much. So listen, now your most recent position had you running a secular yeshiva, right?
hmm
So now you already know that there's gonna be so many different questions behind that, like
You're going to
you
ask
know.
me about the paradox of a secular yeshiva?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, who wouldn't want to know the moment that they hear secular yeshiva, and everybody wants to know what does that mean, and how'd you even get excited about doing something like that?
Yeah, it's a great starting question. And unfortunately, it's going to take us down a definition rabbit hole.
Okay.
Because when I say something like secular yeshiva, it begs the question, what is secular? And it begs the question, what's a yeshiva? So let's
Right.
start from the very beginning.
Right.
Let's start with the word that's maybe harder to translate, but that maybe is more familiar, which is yeshiva. Have you spent much time in a yeshiva, Nissim?
No, thank God. Thank God I have not.
Why do you say thank God? Let's jump right in.
I'm just saying the guys, it's like a yeshiva thing, and I'm not against. Obviously, I'm not against yeshiva, but there's something that is so great and so grand about being that either Balchuva, in my case, a Ger that came from the outside, that had this magical love affair with Hashem, that came
hmm
running after whoever would teach me something, and not being able. It just so happened that I converted in Seattle, not a big yeshiva place. There's no yeshivas there, really.
hmm
So there was no place for me. I was going to the Kollel, and I was learning with people at their home, and because that was my way, everything was I had to work for everything I learned for. There was no system, there was no base midrash for me to just go sit in and just jump into the. I had to work for everything that I had, and I see the benefit of that over everything's being handed to me. I'm in yeshiva. There's a Rosh Yeshiva. Go ask all my questions to, or whatever. The struggle and the toil to find emes is so much more rewarding when you didn't come up in the system, so to speak.
Great. So I had a similar experience of having to sort of climb every ladder to get access to learning for
Mm-hmm.
different reasons than perhaps you didn't
Right.
find learning readily available.
Mm-hmm.
So that by the time I found myself in a yeshiva setting, which was in the summer of 2014, I just spent 2 months in Manhattan at an amazing, amazing institution called Yeshivat Hadar. Hadar
Mm-hmm.
is on the Upper West Side. And by the time I landed at Hadar and I was in what you call sort of like the system,
Mm-hmm.
I was so relieved because I found myself finally in a place where I wasn't fighting tooth and nail to get access to the learning, but the
Mm.
learning was just all around me. And I was able to let go of the struggle of how to find Jewish learning, and I was able to actually enjoy it in
Right.
an immersive way. So I fell in love with a yeshiva, and I'm not the typical person perhaps that you would think of when you think of a yeshiva student, because I think
Mm-hmm.
probably like the general image, the stereotypical image of a yeshiva bocher is obviously a bocher, it's a guy. And we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, Orthodox. We're talking about people who know how to like move their bodies like this back and forth, shuckling while they're learning. And,
Right.
they're wearing certain outfits that I wouldn't wear. And I didn't care that I wasn't the typical persona of someone who would have access to a yeshiva. Fell in love with the idea of Jewish learning, and I was looking for learning wherever I could get it. This was in my early 20s when I discovered Jewish learning, and I'm sure you and I will get to how I became interested in Jewish learning. But a yeshiva is a place where you can do traditional Jewish learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Right.
place where the tables are in rows, and you sit across the table from your chavrusa, from your chavruta, from your partner, your learning pair, and there is a certain noise of all of these learning pairs sitting across the table from each other and
Kol
studying
Torah.
the same material but in their own way.
Right. Right. Right.
So that's a yeshiva. Okay, fine. Now what's a secular yeshiva? What's secular? So I think secular is a terrible word, and I wish I didn't have to use it, but I don't know what word to use. And if you, in your command of the English language and in all of your artistic creativity, can come up with a better word for secular, Nissim, then this podcast will have paid the dues. um, But when I use the word secular, I'm actually translating a word from Hebrew, which is the word chiloni.
Right.
And chiloni has a different connotation in Hebrew and in Israeli culture than I think the word secular does in
Right.
English.
I mean, but it's like that with a lot of words. It's so hard to like once you say it in English, it's like, no, but it
Yeah, I
doesn't
don't
really
really mean
mean.
that. Yeah.
Right. It's
Exactly.
amazing.
So when you say secular in English, probably what you mean is like a world without God.
Mm-hmm.
And that means a world without revelation. It means that you access knowledge through reason instead of
Mm-hmm.
through divine revelation.
Right.
And so if you're just like on the street talking about secular in America, probably what people think you mean is I don't believe in God.
Right. Right.
I don't think that's what it means in Israel. I don't think that Chiloni has anything really to do with God. I think a lot of Chiloni people in Israel believe in God.
Right.
So when you say Chiloni in Israel, what you're talking about is not observant.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about is someone who's not shomer mitzvot, someone who doesn't keep the commandments, someone who doesn't keep kosher, someone who doesn't keep Shabbat.
Right.
And I'm using chiloni, I'm using secular. When I say secular yeshiva, I'm really talking about non-observant. So I'm
Right.
talking about a place where you can learn Torah and Talmud and
Mm-hmm.
all traditional Jewish texts in a traditional way without having to keep strict observance of the commandments. That's what I
Got,
mean when I say secular yeshiva.
got it. Got it. So, and I mean, I guess the end goal would be, I mean, what is the end goal from that? If you have a bunch of people who may be, so to speak, out of touch with their roots, you know, out of touch with their roots, and it's like a big thing for me. I feel as a person, like I said, I was not born and did not grow up, in Judaism and the Jewish. I feel like when I started learning Torah, I was returning home. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
this was something that was deep seated inside of me. That's something I was connected to. That was beyond, anything I could have imagined. And so, how much more so for a person who Chiloni, who's secular or whatever, for lack of a better term. We'll try to come up with one before we finish. But like how, what's the end goal are you seeing, and whatever you're trying to achieve, do you see that you're achieving
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I can't say for sure that I can see that I'm achieving it, but I can tell you about my own personal experience because I feel like I achieved it.
right?
I was at a crossroads in my Jewish journey.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my early 20s. I had grown up Reform. I had spent time in Israel. And there was something still lacking for me. There was something that wasn't full about my
Mm-hmm.
Judaism.
Right.
But because I grew up Reform and because I hung out in secular Israel in my teens, I had come back to America in my early 20s and I wasn't really sure how to fill up my Judaism
Mm-hmm.
because to be fully Jewish in America, to have an immersive Jewish experience, to have a Jewish life that's full of meaning, I mean, the truth is the people who are doing the best are the Orthodox Jews, if I'm being
Right.
honest.
Right.
And so I couldn't figure out how to have a full Jewish experience in my day to day without becoming Orthodox. And I am not a person who keeps Shabbat. I'm not a person who keeps strict kosher, and I didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't sure how to fill up my Jewish life.
Mm-hmm.
And what I experienced when I started learning Torah for the first time was that it was the first experience I had Jewishly where it just felt like it was growing the Jewish feeling inside me from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time where I felt like, oh, learning Torah makes me feel more Jewish all the time,
Right. Right.
24/7.
Right.
Right? The way that it works, I think, is probably as simple as this. You know, when you like see a great movie or you listen to a great song, and then for like the next day, everything makes you think of that movie, everything makes you think of that song.
Right. 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 Right.
Learning
For
Torah is
sure.
like that because when you learn a piece of Torah in the morning, you walk around with it for the rest of the day and
Right.
everything makes you think about it. And so
Right.
what ends up happening is that you learn a little bit of Torah in the morning and then the rest of your day feels more Jewish. It takes
Right.
on a Jewish feeling because your reference set becomes more Jewish in some way. The
Right.
things that you are reacting to in the world aren't just the song you heard yesterday or the movie you liked last week. It's some
Right.
Jewish story, it's some Jewish teaching, it's some Jewish person, and you start seeing the world through Jewish eyes when you learn
Mm-hmm.
Torah.
Right. No, I would definitely agree with that, and I think one of the biggest issues that I've had, so to speak, in the wider Jewish world. And I think much more so in the system, yeshiva system, is the lack of study of the whole Torah. Really, I'm gonna say the whole Torah, studying Tanakh, and these things. It's like, oh my goodness, if you knew and one of my favorite things is like this. I love to learn Tanakh, and I'm really focusing on the relationships that the individuals are having with God in the Tanakh.
Beautiful.
I'm looking at the chen and the favor that Hashem is placing on Abraham, and I'm looking at that, and I'm reading the pasukim of Hashem saying blessing him, and Hashem, why don't I have these blessings? I also want these blessings. I also want this type of relationship with you. David Amelech, King David. It says that he was a man after God's own heart. I also want to be like that. How come they're not saying what they're gonna write after the book's written about me? What are they gonna write? And the you know the amount of faith and amuna that could come out of it, that's very simple without it having to be forced, comes very much so, I feel like, when people study Tanakh. So my question for you is, what do you do with the God question then, right? So I'm assuming, like you're learning Torah, especially if you're learning, and one of the biggest things is that Gemara and Mishnah, different things you can learn, and you can forget the God of whose Torah you're learning, as opposed to where other pieces of Torah are a little bit more intimate. So with you, and studying so many different subjects, do you feel like sometimes that the God question comes up and it's out of place? You don't know how to give it over to people, or, walk me through that.
Oh gosh, from what you just said, there's like 20 things I want to respond to. So let me quickly respond to two
You really
things
have been learning a
before.
lot of Torah then.
Yeah, right. The back and forth has begun. You're my charusa today. So
Amazing.
let me quickly just address two things before I, poorly and incompletely address the God question.
Okay.
So first of all, I just want to tell you that from the little I know about you, I know that you have a really strong relationship with Hashem, and it's one that I admire just from hearing your story and from hearing the way that you talk about it. And I just want to tell you that the more and more you learn Tanakh, the more that I hope you'll see that you're not alone in feeling like, why isn't God reaching out to me directly? There are so many characters and so many people in our history and in our shared narratives who have also had that struggle, and that is the struggle. And if you see God talking to Abraham, you see God talking to Moshe, there's also times when Abraham and Moshe felt like God wasn't talking to them enough. So I just want you to know that you're not alone. Okay, the second thing I wanted to say is that it's really funny to hear you say, there's so much access to something like Talmud, but when are we going to study Tanakh? Because I grew up Reform and I grew up a woman. I had Tanakh available to me. There was Tanakh everywhere for me. But for me, I was like, where's the rabbinics? When do I get access to Talmud, right? I'm not observant and I'm a woman. Do I just never get to learn Talmud? And so thank God there are a few places now where you can learn Talmud, and it's from those institutions that have done that incredibly important revolutionary work of opening up access to Talmud study for women that I have been able to really deeply fall in love with our Torah tradition through those amazing, amazing people who have made Talmud available to women. So that's the second thing I wanted to say. Now, the God question. It's a huge question. How do you learn these texts without having God be a major part of your experience, whether spiritually or even just theologically? How do you deal with these texts without God? And the question is, you don't. You don't learn these texts without God, right? There's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance that one can practice, where you can read these stories where God is a character you're reading about, or an idea you're reading about, and not something necessarily that you yourself relate to, or you yourself can feel, or you yourself can access. And I think the more and more that you work with God in these texts in a way that you're comfortable with, the more and more that you will figure out the role that God wants to play in your study. Which is to say, it's a journey.
Got it.
God's
So it is,
there. God's there.
Got it. Okay, so here's my next question for you. Now, which I could just stop after the punchline. You live in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Yes, I
do. Okay, so it's not a place where I spend much of my time at all. But the energies often seem to be against tradition. They would seem to be against studying the Torah. At the JCC, There's a lot of Jews there also too, right? But there seems to be like there's some anti Torah, vibes going on over there. So
Yep.
where do you see the future of Torah study happening for Jews, who see themselves secular, in that place?
Okay, great. So first of all, for those of you who I've never met who are listening to this, I live in Palo Alto, California, which
Hmm.
is, as Nissim said, the heart of Silicon Valley.
Right.
And my husband is involved in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is everywhere here. You can't escape it.
Right.
And when I sort of came upon the idea that I was going to be doing this work of opening a secular yeshiva at the JCC in Palo Alto, I thought the same thing that you're asking me. Palo
Hmm.
Alto does not seem like the right place for this kind of work.
Right.
And the truth is, what I've discovered here, thank God, is just the perfect, like spot on place for a
Hmm.
secular yeshiva. Why?
Wow.
Okay,
Why?
so first of all, yes, we're in a secular place. We're in a place, we're not in New York, we're not in LA. We're in a place with a lot of secular Jews or
Hmm.
non affiliated Jews.
Hmm.
But this is not a community that is afraid of wisdom.
Right.
I live in like the smartest place on planet Earth. Everyone is brilliant. And
Hmm.
these are people who are interested in learning. They are
Right.
interested in finding wisdom wherever wisdom is offered. So
Mm.
this is not a place where people are against Torah learning. This is a place where they perhaps are not traditional, but they are not against learning in whatever form it appears.
Got it.
The second thing is that this is a place with a ginormous population of Israeli expats. And the
Right.
Israelis who live here are not traditional. They are secular because they came here for work. They didn't come here for any other reason except to work in tech. And
Wow.
that is a primarily secular community.
Right.
And when
Right.
that Israeli community gets to Palo Alto, they start discovering that they're actually Jewish. And so what they're looking for is a place to deepen their Jewish commitment, but they're not going to change their Jewish practice.
Right.
So finding a place where there's access to learning and no behavioral expectations is actually kind of the perfect blend.
Got it. Got it. Totally understood. Okay, so for me, let's see how you answer this one. Okay. I'm big. I would say my whole essence, and I would say the anchor of my whole entire Judaism hinges on prayer, hinges on tefillah. Even in yeshivas, where a typical yeshiva, where there's obviously a lot of Torah study going on, they also have time for set regular prayers. So not only in the yeshiva, but also I guess I'll ask also in your personal life, where does prayer fit into your to your curriculum, and also where does it fit into your personal life?
It's a great question. Can I just ask you a follow-up question before I answer?
For sure.
Did prayer come first for you, or did something else come first?
I think that prayer, meaning something else, as in,
Did you
uh,
connect to Judaism through community and then you found prayer? Did you connect to Judaism through Torah and then you
oh no,
found
it was
prayer? Did you
prayer
connect through
first. It was
Israel and then
definitely
prayer?
okay. Very good question. No, it was prayer first. It was definitely prayer first. I
And
was
what was it
praying.
about Jewish prayer?
I think even when I had a to for a period in life where I was a very strong Christian in my teenage years. Even back then, prayer was my thing. I read the whole entire Bible. I highlighted it so much you couldn't even. There was no point of having to highlight it because the whole thing was highlighted. I remembered where every verse was, every scripture, whatever. But my thing was that even at 16 years old, 17 years, I would close myself inside of my room and I would pray and just talk to God for
Mm,
so long and cry tears, literally. So
wow.
by the time I'm having my wake up moment, and I'm coming to Judaism, and I just got out of a very bad situation. My natural response was
Mm-hmm.
praying, and I prayed a lot of prayers. And I think that the more and more I got involved in Judaism, it left
Mm-hmm.
because that wasn't what was going on. It wasn't a part of the program. Yeah, we had Shachris, you had Mincha, you had Marv, the 3 daily prayers, but nobody was talking. And it wasn't until I came across the books of Rabbi Arush and the Breslov teachings that I was like, this is it. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was, because I started to feel like a great lack. I was gaining a lot of knowledge, a lot of information I didn't know, and it was a beautiful thing, but nothing helped me like going back and realizing how important tefillah was and how important prayer was, in your own personal life. So for me, I live with that. I'm talking about the, I mean, when I say to pray about something to people, I'm generally not talking about, you know, go to this grave site, say a few Tehillah, and everything's good. I'm not saying everything's good, but I have been at
Hmm.
grave sites where I've stayed 17 hours. I didn't move. I prayed to God for 17 hours, 15 hours. I'm talking about I literally live with this in you. So I for me, it's the biggest thing. I even use my music. People ask me, what do you listen to? I don't listen to anything. I use it. If it's usable for me to get myself into a place where I can speak to God, then I listen to it. If not, then I just generally don't have time. So
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying because as I picture you as a kid praying on your bedroom floor, I'm reminded that Jewish prayer is primarily not spontaneous. It's
right.
set.
Mm-hmm.
There's a set text and there's set times. And I never really connected to that. I didn't have that experience as a Jewish kid growing up loving those set prayers because I didn't know what I was saying. I spoke
Right.
Hebrew, but I didn't understand what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
For me, Torah came first, or Torah connected me best,
Mm-hmm.
because what I started to discover was that all of the prayers that I know, and I know them by heart,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually a hodgepodge of verses.
Right. Right.
My teacher, Rabbi Eli Confer, taught this to me, and it blew my mind that so much of our prayer is just a collage of different verses from different places in Tanakh. And when
Right.
I started learning in a more serious way, and then I could locate and recognize where those verses were coming from and what ideas they were calling on, that's when the prayer started coming to life for me. But
Mm.
I didn't have a feeling of, oh, I can just spontaneously pray and I will be moved, because I didn't know what I was saying. It's
Right.
now that I've been able to access the deeper meaning of those prayers through my deeper knowledge and my broader knowledge of Torah and of our canon. That's when the prayers have started to come to life for me. Um,
Wow.
but I will say that I love singing. So any
Right.
prayer that has to do with singing, I'm into that.
Really?
And
That's amazing.
y- in college, I went to Wesleyan University, which has a gospel choir that
Mm.
you can join as an elective. And I joined the gospel choir and I loved it so much. And I think Kirk Franklin was like the greatest soundtrack for connecting to God that I've ever experienced. And I started going every Sunday to a Pentecostal church in Hartford because I just loved the music.
Uh-huh.
And I remember feeling like,
Oh my God, you're so Jewish.
yeah, I know exactly right. But I remember feeling, I was sitting in this church and feeling to myself like, oh, why aren't our services like this? Why aren't we, just singing with all of this might and force? And I will say that now that I have a better sense of what our prayers stand for, I'm better able to call up that reverence, call up that feeling, call up that zest, and have a better prayer experience. But it isn't primary for me. It really isn't,
See, it's an
or at least
interesting
not yet.
thing. Right. No, listen, it's coming. Let's just hope we get there and nothing makes us pray. So I think the biggest thing for me is I felt that same way also too. You have to realize coming in, and I've had that question from other people who were converting or Bali Chuvas who were coming back to Orthodox Judaism from um, either the secular or primarily from the Christian background, who have had these fiery services
Mm-hmm.
where God is and I'm a big believer. I know there's a lot of people who are very anti or whatever, and I was a Christian. I hate when one of the worst things that I dislike, although I'm not a Christian today. I have been a Muslim, but I don't like hearing people down talk these other faiths because I've seen people with complete devotion and faith in what they believe in. Not all of them, may agree with it, but there has been people that have been sincere,
Mm-hmm.
wholeheartedly, have given over themselves completely to God, the best way that they know how, the best way that's been revealed to them. I mean, my wife was just talking about this, like, with all these different things that go on, we have Tehillim groups and all this other stuff, but she participated in church shut-ins. They shut the door. They hit the lights, the candles. Everybody's on their face before God, screaming out to God. Now, the truth is, that's not a church original. That comes from Judaism. That's a
Mm.
play out of our textbook, right? And we're no longer, what we used to be. But one of the biggest things that I've gotten encouraged from, apart from my many trips to Uman for Rosh Hashanah,
Oh
um,
wow!
eh,
I really
eh,
want to go. I really want to do that.
it's a different type of electricity. It's a different type of prayer. I was in Mesharim, maybe I would say just before Rosh Hashanah, so maybe a week or two before Rosh Hashanah. I stayed in Jerusalem, and I went to Mesharim, and there's a certain shti block, like a place where there's I don't know how you say, everybody has prayers. It's like a prayer factory,
Mm.
okay, it starts at this time, this room, it starts at that time, whatever. And I'm looking for this place because I missed the main minion that I wanted to go to. So I ended up stumbling into, I think it was told as Avram Yitzhak, certain Hasidic group. And I'm telling you, I walked in, the place was like electricity. These guys are praying and davening, and you see even and I'm talking about such fire that I was stuck for a second. I was just like, oh, God, thank God it still exists. It still exists. The feel
Mhm.
still exists. And I think that it's more than, and I tell people this all the time because I'm a breast lover. People think I say it, but I'm telling you this even before I knew anything about breast love, even prayer itself is more Jewish than Rashi and Tosfos. This is the most and I'm not talking about the individuals. I'm talking about the commentaries and the Meforshim and everything else that come out of it. The most Jewish thing you can do is pray. I was reading even the Parsha, learning Parsha today, and I'm reading in Lech Lecha, and the amount of time just saying that, and Abraham stopped and he went and invoked the name of Hashem. He went and invoked that. That's our heritage. This is what they did. This is what they did. So it's always, if I can be of
Nissim,
any
Baruch Hashem.
encouragement, you got to pray. Keep praying.
Baruch Hashem, Nissim, you and I in our chavrusa today, we have found our great machlokas. You and I have found our great disagreement in our chavrusa today, because you will say that the most Jewish thing is prayer, and I will say that the
It's
most
Torah.
Jewish thing is Torah, and we can duke it out through a lifetime of learning and conversation.
Okay, I would say this at least. You can't have one without the other. That what I would
Mm.
definitely say.
Well, what
So
I will tell you is that I'm not so deeply connected to prayer, but I've had fiery experiences.
right,
And God is accessed in this world through fiery experiences that come when they come.
right,
And
right,
I when I met my husband, I had that experience. Under our chuppah, I had that experience.
right,
And it
right,
wasn't
right,
connected to prayer, but oh my goodness, did I have the experience of God's presence on this earth.
right, right, right. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, so I have more questions for you before we end, before we get into a bigger machlokas. We still got to figure out the solution for secular in English, but I didn't forget it. So Israel's goal and its purpose is always framed as being a land for Jews, right? It's always, this is the land of the Jews, but there's so many different disagreements. There's a lot of machlokas. You talk about the Torah and
Yeah.
Tefillah. There's a lot of big issues going on here. Primarily, you see this between the Orthodox or Haredi community and the secular community. What do you think that we need in order for there to be a better relationship between these groups? And do you
Mm.
believe there's a solution?
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty optimistic. I will say
Mhm.
I might be in the minority because I'm feeling some optimism
Mhm.
about the divisions in our Jewish world.
Mhm.
And the reason why I'm feeling optimistic is as follows. I grew up really Zionist, and I
Mhm.
Israel is in my bones, and I feel like
Mhm.
it was there from the moment that I entered this world. Israel was in my bones.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I have learned to appreciate so much about Israel, I knew I felt it. I knew I had this connection. And now that I've learned more about Israel and spent more time in Israel, I have a deeper appreciation. And one of the reasons is because even from the very beginning of Israel, there were debates about what Israel should be.
Right.
There were people who believed in sort of like what I'll call the Herzl camp, that Israel
Mhm.
was a place for Jews, which meant it was a place where we could be safe and avoid anti Semitism and have sovereignty and self defense. And then there were those who I'll call the Achad Ha'am school. Achad Ha'am is another one of these early Zionist thinkers, and he was more of the opinion that the purpose of Zionism was not to be a hub for Jews, but for Israel to be a hub for Judaism. It
Mhm.
should be a place where Judaism was getting put back into its homeland so that Judaism could flourish in its natural soil.
Right.
And that mission of Achad Ha'am got seriously interrupted because of the Holocaust. We
Right.
lost so many Jews that the Herzl vision of what Israel needed to be won out. We needed to preserve our bodies because how could we preserve our ideas and our lives and our culture how could we preserve anything if we weren't preserving ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
But now it's been 70 years since the Holocaust. And one of the reasons why we have so much division in Jewish life is because, thank God, we have enough Jews again for there to be a variety of different iterations of what Jewish life looks like. And I actually think we're at this beautiful moment in Jewish history where we're finally at a critical mass again post-Holocaust, that we can have every little iteration of what Jewish life should look like, and every group has their own idea of what's most important, and and there's enough people for each of those groups to exist. And so I actually think we're at a turning point where the divisions we're seeing now is actually a good sign. And some of the boundaries are going to start melting away. Right. And I'm hoping that this is a journey towards a sort of boundaryless Jewish life where we can be more unified in all of the ways that we practice and all the ways we believe.
Right. It's very good. Very good answer. Okay, so my last but not least question is this. So you have been involved in many different projects. Which one was your favorite and why?
Oh, that's so not fair. That is so not fair because I am made from all of the amazing experiences, and I am full of gratitude to oh my God, the Jewish professionals and Jewish philanthropists who made my Jewish life possible. I am a product of programs. I have done every program, and I have worked at so many institutions, and I love them all. Thank God.
I feel the same way about my songs, but if I'm holding on to one and somebody else says, no, this one is that,
if I'm holding on to one of your songs, it's Motherland Bounce. I love Motherland Bounce.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Which, by the way, was not my favorite. I definitely did not. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes you never know. When it comes to, because sometimes even if it's something that's dear to you, right? It could later on being like, wow, well, this one was the most impactful, so therefore it becomes my favorite. I'm gonna say the Motherland Bounce, but that was the one song I recorded, and I was like, all right, let's get out of here. And everybody else pushed me. Everybody else pushed me to put that song out. It wasn't my favorite. if you listen to the album, I think I had 17 songs that never got released. It was with the label. They're still holding the album. That's the only song that sounds close to like that. Nothing else. Everything else is much more melodic and more crazy. So it was through everybody else pushing that one song, and now everybody's like, oh, Motherland Bounce. And I wouldn't have thought that. So you never can be so sure,
By the way, not to knock it, but I also love the opening bars of The Deal, from which this podcast gets its name. It's so good.
Thank you so much.
So my Jewish home has been for about a decade an organization called BINA, and BINA is based in Tel Aviv, and it is the place that hosts the secular yeshiva, and it is the place through which I was able to start building my own version of a secular yeshiva here in Palo Alto, which is housed at the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto. So through a partnership of the JCC in Palo Alto and BINA, I've been able to do my work of creating a secular yeshiva. So give credit where credit is due. That's my home. But I'll say that I think, and I'm just going to put in a plug for an organization that I'm only loosely affiliated with. I think the most important organization of our time is Sefaria. Because Sefaria just gave access to Jewish texts to anyone with the internet. And it gave access to those texts as well as the layering of the commentaries in English.
Right.
And I can't imagine how Jewish learning could happen in our day and age without Sefaria. Wow. So I just want to give credit to that organization because I think it is the most important organization of our time. And people are able to participate in building Sefaria. I think I was so lucky Sefaria asked me to write an essay that they posted, and I wrote an essay about challah. Challah, the bread. I mean, the bread we all know and love, but know nothing about. And I was able to write this essay about challah that got posted on Sefaria, and through that process, I got to know a little bit more about the amazing things that Sefaria have created. And I just, Sefaria.org, here's my pitch. I think it's the most important organization of our time.
It's a great pitch. That's a great pitch, by the way. I didn't come up with anything for secular, but listen, at the end of the day, it seems to be doing something. I think the biggest thing is that it is you're doing something that is going to remind people of the essence of where they came from, and it's going to open up to a lot of people. And I'm sure you see it, and you probably have seen it. The opportunity that they probably wouldn't have got if they would have just lived life the way that they did, that they wouldn't even have stopped to think, how many people will come up. I was at a I was at a concert. I think I was doing a concert years ago, maybe 8 years ago, at Sasquatch, and I'm, there with, I don't know how many people are Jews. At least people know they're Jewish. But I'm trying to get a minyan. It's early in the morning. I had to stay over there in the campgrounds, and I got, a Sefer Torah with me. I have a rabbi, and I got about 7 guys, and we're running around asking, okay, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? And one of these, one of the guys that was there, he goes, no, I'm not Jewish, but my mother's mother was Jewish, but I'm not Jewish. Guys like him, you know what I mean, who could benefit from something like this to at least know just the beauty of what they have, and where the neshama comes from. It's a big, big, big step. So I
As my
commend you for
mother
that.
would say, from your lips to God's ears.
Oh man, oh man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you so much.